Welcome back, besties. We did it. We did it. I finally don't look like shit in one of these videos. I did my hair. I took a shower. We're using natural light. I mean, don't look at the zits on my face. I mean, I could at some point try to wear makeup in one of these videos, but that's neither here nor there. So for this video, I decided that I'm actually going to do a story time. A couple of videos back in my birthday video and in the first video that I actually ever posted on YouTube, I mentioned a job experience that I had that was like one of my worst job experiences. And because I need content and because I haven't read one of the books that I'm trying to read for this vlog, we're going to talk about this one job experience. Hours were something like from like 9 a.m. to like 1 or 2 p.m. I would work at the community college, and then after I was done there, then I would drive over to a different place. I worked for this one like logistics company, and I think my hours were something from like 3 to 9 p.m. I don't quite remember. Honestly, I tried to like black out this period of my life. So anyway, it was very much like I would finish my time at the community college, and then I would have a really short, quick lunch, and then I would drive right over to this office, this logistic company. So from the community college to my home, I would have lunch. So like from the community college to my home, it was like a 20-minute so drive, and then I would eat really quickly, and then I would drive over to the logistics company's office, and then from my home to that company's office, I think it was like a 25-minute or 30-minute drive. So I would literally get out of like the community college where I worked at, and then I would drive home, shovel food in my mouth really quickly, and then drive over to the office. And I think I was working something like, I don't know, something crazy like 65 hours a week. Like it was a lot for one person, and I was making like a good amount of money, but it was just very stressful and very hard. And then I had something in my life happen where I had to quit both of the jobs at the same time. So then going from working like 50, 60, 65 hours in a week to then doing absolutely nothing and having no income or no job was kind of, it felt really strange. Like I would wake up in the morning and I'd be like, oh my God, I have to be somewhere, when I actually in fact did not. So in between that time of like leaving both of those jobs and like having nothing to do, I really like fell into a weird like depression or a very like weird time in my life where I just didn't have anything to do. And I got really, this is a funny story, I got really into organic farming. I started an organic farm in my mom's backyard, and like my plants and everything was like thriving. It was doing well. And I like at some point, I think I had like a mental breakdown where I honestly looked at my mom and I was like, you know what? We could stop buying food from the grocery store and we could just live off of my organic produce and veggies that I'm like producing here. And she honestly thought that I was quite crazy. Honestly, she wasn't wrong. She wasn't wrong. Like I was just not thriving in my life at that time. And so she sent me to go live with my sister in Texas. So then I flew down there and I stayed with my sister for about 2 weeks before I decided the state of Texas was just not for me. Like I did not like living in Texas at all. So then I came back up over to the Chicagoland area. I probably should have mentioned that at this time in my life, I was living in the Chicagoland area. I won't tell you exactly where because you could literally find me and stalk me and kill me. Then I moved back to the Chicagoland area and I decided, I need to actually find regular like 9-to-5 type of job. I cannot be working 2 jobs and like running myself into the ground. Like hustle culture is just not the vibe. It's just not for me. I literally cannot do that. I reached out to this one place where they like look for people who want temporary jobs, because at that time in my life I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And so when I reached out to this one temp agency, they connected me to this company, and I won't say where, because this is where I actually get into the job experience that was actually horrible. So they connected me with this one company, and I will say that they manufacture like nails and nail guns, and they're kind of like a construction company. That company that I worked for was like a division within like a larger company that made like construction equipment. So I knew that like going into this was going to be like a temporary position. I just needed like some source of income. And so I applied, I got the temporary position, and the temporary position was in like purchasing. area of this construction nail gun company. So once I started working in there, I think I was like working as a temp in their purchasing department for like, I want to say like 6 months. I don't actually remember. The customer service manager actually needed help in her department because she had 2 employees, a guy and a girl, that were working in that department, and she needed help because they were just like very backlogged. And then while I was in the purchasing department at this place, they were just like, hey, you know, Lexi's got some time on her hands. She has like the capacity to handle some more work, so let's have her help your customer service team. So then that's what I did. I helped their customer service team, and then once the customer service manager was able to get their position open, she just kind of reached out to me. She's like, hey, you should apply. You're already doing the work. I like you. Just give that a shot. And so at this time, because I was working at this company temporarily, I decided it might be time to like actually get a permanent position and really like put my foot down in the ground somewhere at some kind of company. And I also at this time actually really needed medical insurance. So because of the American healthcare is just so goddamn awful, that was really the only reason why I decided to apply to this customer service position, because at this time like I said, I needed medical insurance. And at this time, this was like, now we're into like 2016, where I actually got diagnosed with my medical condition that I have now. Maybe at some point in the future, I'll make a whole different story time on my medical condition. But the best way to explain what this customer service manager, and let's just call her Nancy. We're not going to say her real name. So when I met Nancy for the first time, I honestly was like, appearances, the way that she dressed, the way that she looked, I was like, oh, yikes. But, you know, never judge a book by its cover. And so I decided maybe I'm just being unfair. Maybe she's like a great manager. I'll actually insert a picture of this one person that I think really looks a lot like her. The person I'm showing is this cult leader named Gwen Shamalara. And if you're looking at this picture right now, then yikes. That is like legit what Nancy looked like. So I know I was getting all kind of red flags from Nancy, just like the way that like she managed, because like as I mentioned before, I was like helping her team out, and just the way that she like managed her team and like her communication, I kind of already like was seeing the kind of red flags that you don't want to see in a manager. Like I just felt like she was not able to stick up for her own employees and really advocate for them. But like I said, I really needed health insurance, and I really needed a permanent job. So I was just like, this one's right in front of me. Let me do this and apply for this. So then I applied, and then I got the job, obviously. And so when I was at this company, they actually decided to move their office further away from like where I lived. And it wasn't so far that it was like a terrible commute. But again, like I mentioned, I needed health insurance. I was going through the medical condition that I got diagnosed with. You have to go through a few years of surgeries and therapy, in order to get past like the rough part of my medical condition. So I knew that at least when I got hired there permanently in 2016, that I knew that at least I had to stick through working at this company until 2018 in order to be done with all of my like surgeries and like treatments that I needed to have for my medical condition. Again, the US healthcare system, yikes. And so everything was kind of just like going okay-ish when I started early 2016. And then when I actually had to have my first surgery, I put in my FMLA, like short-term FMLA. I think I took like a month and a half off of work, and they came back and it was fine. And then I found out I had to have a second surgery. So then I put in my FMLA again, my short-term medical disability. And this time around, however, they had hired a temp worker, so then it wasn't just like a department of me and the 2 other employees and my manager. They hired another temp worker there who was actually one of my friends, and I kind of gave him a good recommendation. So I actually had my second surgery, and he was being trained by somebody else on the team. If I hadn't had to go to surgery, I would have been the one that was training him, but just the way that things fell. And so while I was actually on my medical leave, I had intended to take another like month and a half off. But then he messaged me and he was like, Lexi, things are not going great here. I don't know if I can stick it out. I don't know if you can help me. And honestly, I came back from my short-term disability leave like 2 weeks early because he was just struggling so hard. And I didn't think that it was his fault. I really think it was like the training that he was being given. It's kind of a pretty big red flag that I had to come back from my leave pretty early. And I had a kind of surgery where like you have to take time off to recover and heal, because I came back and I was just like really struggling to help my friend out and struggling to like do my own work. And then shady things started happening within this role. So the manager, Nancy, let's just go back to her for a second. She was very much, if I could just describe her a little bit further for you guys, like Nancy, she was very much this kind of woman where she was like, the bigger the hair, the closer to God. She like jingled when she walked because she would wear so much jewelry. And she was also obsessed with her weight. She was obsessed with like losing weight, being as tiny as she can be. She was just always talking about like the new like diet program that she was on, and like the new foods that she was trying to eating, or this new like cleanse that she was on. And I just like, I could like set that aside and just be like, you know what? That's her personal life. I'm just going to focus on me. I'm going to focus on work. But things started to get really, really weird really fast, because my manager started asking me to do stuff that I was just like not okay with. Ended up actually doing them because, again, I was terrified of like losing my job because I needed healthcare like so badly. One of the things that she asked me to do is that when she was on vacation with her family, she actually asked me to go over to her house and drop some stuff off for her son's like graduation party at her house. So she ended up giving me like the keys or the code, I think it was, to her garage. So I ended up having to go over to her house and like do some stuff in our house and drop some stuff off, and that was kind of weird. And then things just started to devolve from there. So let's go and talk about the two coworkers that were actually in the apartment, and let's just change their names so that no one can come at me for this video. So we had the two permanent workers, so we'll just call one of them Bob, and we'll call the other one Jane. Bob was very conservative, and if you know anything about me, very much the opposite. And he was very much like shoving down his political beliefs onto everyone that worked there. And then we had Jane, who was very much like someone who liked to gossip, someone who liked to stir up trouble, and I very much like tried to ignore it. I feel like when you're at work, if you have your political beliefs, I think it's fine for you to believe what you want to believe, but you shouldn't be forcing it down somebody else's throat. And then there was just Jane, who was always up in somebody's business, always trying to find out, like, is this person doing what they're supposed to be doing? Is this person not following the rules that Nancy set? And so what really did it in for me is that my entire time there, from when I started permanently in 2016 to when I ended up leaving in 2019, the manager, Nancy, she would constantly be trying to set me up on dates. This is at a time in my life when I was very much single and not seeing anyone. And this manager was very much, she wants that office romance. She wants to be the person that like sets people up. And you know what's really funny about that is that the manager, Nancy, there was this rumor going around that she had cheated on her husband, who also, her husband worked at the company, and she cheated on with somebody else who worked at the company and actually ended up getting divorced from her husband. And that was kind of a rumor that was going on in the office. I actually don't know if that's true at all or not, but it was a rumor that was being spread around the office. And so the entire time there, she was trying to set me up. She would constantly just be like, hey, let me set up a Match.com profile for you, or why don't you start going on, all these dating apps. And at that time, I was just like, not, like I mentioned, I was going through my own like medical condition, my own like little health scare and stuff, and having all these surgeries and have all this treatment. And it was like starting to like date someone or see someone was just like not something that I was like wanting to do at that time. And so she would constantly be telling, like, let's just go outside and I'll take your, Match.com profile, or I'll start a like Tinder account for you, or what have you. And I feel like older me now, 32-year-old Lexi, would have just like nipped that in the butt. I would have said, thanks, but no thanks. This is my personal life. Let's just keep it about work. But me back in 2016, I was very much naive. I didn't want to get myself in trouble. I didn't want to like say no to the manager. I was just very much kind of just like going with the flow of whatever this manager wanted. And so the things really started to evolve from there because Bob and Jane really started to just like get into it all the time because Bob was able to somehow be able to get to work remotely at home, I think a couple days a week. And like Jane was not down for that. She was like, well, if I have to be in the office, then you have to be in the office. So she was always like snooping in other people's business. And then I think what really did it in for me with my manager, Nancy, is that there was this one day that I told her like, hey, I'm going to take this, I don't remember if it was a Thursday or Friday off, but I was like, I'm going to take this day off because I need to go get treatment. And I told her like, I will be at the hospital on this day and I'm going to get treatment for my medical condition. And the kind of treatment that I was going to get is like, once you get the treatment done, you can't operate any machinery. I mean, like drive or do anything like work related for 72 hours. So I would usually take like a Thursday or Friday off to go and do like my medical treatment. And honestly, if I knew back in the day that I could have done like FMLA and not have to take PTO for my treatments, I would probably done that. But nobody told me that that was something that I could do. So yeah, I told her very upfront, like, I'm going to be in the hospital this day. Like, I'm going to go get treatment. I know that I finished all the work that I was like due that week. And so I thought in my head, okay, she knows where I'm going to be at. All my work is done. Everything's cool. And then actually, I think when I was at the hospital and waiting in the waiting room to get seen, she sends me this picture of her and this guy, and her message just said, oh, I found something that would be really good for you. And I kind of just like in the hospital, I kind of lost it because the last thing that I want while I'm getting treatment that ends up makes me feel like shitty and tired and really lethargic, the last thing I want is my manager shoving someone down my throat, especially because she knew what I was doing that day. She knew that after I got treatment, like I don't feel well. And so that kind of really set me off. Following week when I came back into the office after I was recovered from that specific treatment, she comes up to me and she's like, did you get my picture? Because I didn't respond to her. She was like, did you get my picture? What do you think? She was like, oh, he would be so good for you because he's Puerto Rican and you're both Hispanic. And in my head, it was just giving me vibes of, am I only allowed to date people that are in my racial or ethnic class? Like, it was very much like, she just kind of put it out there that him being Puerto Rican would, for some reason, equate to us being a good match. And the other thing that was about this guy that she was trying to set me up with, he worked at the company. So I just like was not down with it. I was not cool with it. I was very much upset. And so I actually got to the point of where I decided to reach out to HR, and this might have been a mistake because I reached out to HR and I told them what my manager Nancy had been doing. I showed the receipts. I basically was like, hey, I'm not cool with this. Like, can we just have a conversation and just kind of just stop this? That treatment that I got was in 2017, I think late 2017, when I had actually started kind of seeing somebody casually, and she knew this, that I was kind of like seeing or talking to somebody casually. We were not dating. We were just kind of like hanging out and just didn't know where like that was gonna go. And like she knew this. She knew full out that I was seeing somebody because I had mentioned it thinking that this was something that was gonna like actually gonna make her stop, but obviously it didn't. She was still continuing to try to set me up with somebody. So then I reached out to HR because I was just at that point, I was just feeling so uncomfortable with the things that she was doing. And I gave HR all of my receipts and I was like, hey, I don't want her to get in trouble. I would just like this behavior to stop. And this was also at a point where like things were just really boiling over with Bob and Jane. And the other thing about like Bob and Jane is that they were constantly just like bickering with each other. So HR pulled my manager aside. And I remember it because when I went to HR to like file a complaint, like I was so nervous and my like hands were shaking like this. They were shaking and I could not make it stop at work because I was so nervous because I went to HR about when they were going to talk to her. And so the day that they talked to her actually like finally came about. And I remember that day specifically because my cubicle was right in front of my manager's cubicle. And I remember her coming around because like I said, she jingles when she walks. When she would come around to her office, like I heard her just like slam her laptop shut, pack up all her bags and leave. It was like, I think it was like 2 or 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and she just got up and she just left. And I think that Bob and Jane were both like, what just happened there? And me knowing that the HR probably spoke to them. So then the following day when we came back into the office, HR sat me and my manager down and basically just kind of gave her like a slap on the wrist and was just like, hey, don't do that again. And then ever since then, my relationship with my manager was very strained. And let me tell you why. Because the thing about HR at this company is that my manager was best friends, or maybe still is, I don't know, is best friends with the HR generalist that was over our department. So I kind of felt like I was complaining to my manager to her best friend. So right there was like one of my biggest mistakes, that I probably should have not gone to HR, or I probably should have just like quit at that point. And then things like I mentioned before were just like boiling with like Bob and Jane. The HR just decided to sit all four of us down in a conference room. And then my manager, she was trying to come in and she was trying to be so nice and polite, just like pretending like nothing was wrong and pretending like she didn't do anything, or like she wasn't giving like special treatment to other people. And I remember speaking up and just being like, hey, like HR had asked us like, what are some issues that we're having in this department? I remember speaking up and saying that we don't take our lunches until well into 5 hours after starting our shift, and that, if you know anything about Illinois employment law, is illegal. You get 5 hours of starting your shift, like at the 5 hour mark, you got to go and take a lunch. And then my manager was like, I don't think that's a rule. I don't think that's a real thing. And HR was just sitting there like, I don't think that's a real thing either. So I kind of made my manager look bad in front of like the entire team and HR. And so the HR actually had to like investigate it into Illinois employment law, and it actually turns out that I was in fact correct. And so my manager was just absolutely pissed off. I think after that HR sit down, I think my manager intended that to like be a meeting where we just like as a team resolve our issues, but that just kind of escalated things even further. And so from then like my manager like was retaliating against me hardcore. And let me tell you the examples of things that she was retaliating against me. I remember this one time coming into the office, she just came out and she just said, hey Lexi, we had to write you up. And I was very confused as to why I was getting written up. And she basically was like, oh, we had to write you up because you left a bowl on your desk. And that's a violation of the safety code of conduct. And I was just very confused. I was like, how does me leaving like a bowl, a clean cereal bowl on my desk constitute like a work safety policy? But I actually ended up getting written for that. And I was like very pissed off. And I was like, this seems like something really tiny to nitpick. And then it just started devolving from there. The other thing that happened to me is that because of my job that I was doing within customer service, I actually had to enter a lot of orders for like big customers. I had this one really big customer on my plate that I really liked and built a really good relationship with. And she ended up taking that customer away from me because she said that they complained that I didn't get an order in on time. And I actually had to like look into that myself. And I don't really know what happened, but I just feel like she was just like looking for excuses at that point to, find anything to get me in trouble. And so I kind of realized that she was retaliating against me. And then I decided again to go to HR. It was another really bad idea because I told HR, these are the ways that I feel like I'm being retaliated against by my manager. And so I had given, again, HR all the receipts. And so I thought they were just going to sit us down and figure out how can we stop, what's this like back and forth that you're having. And so when HR sat us down, they actually only sat me down, and it wasn't just like the HR generalist, it was like the director of HR that sat me down. She was just like, Lexi, we actually don't believe anything that you're saying. She actually went back to my initial complaints about like my manager trying to set me up with like people to date. Actually went back to that, and she said that she took a good look at the complaint that I filed as well as the retaliation complaint that I filed, and she basically told me that she thought that I was lying even though I had the receipts. And she just told me that, you know what, Lexi, we are going to have you sign the employee code of conduct saying that you are just going to do better. And I fully understand now why some people decide not to go to HR if they're having an issue with their manager or having an issue with the employee, because that could actually lead to negative side effects for you. I mean, like I mentioned, at this entire time from my initial complaint against my manager, I just came into work with so much anxiety and so much stress, wondering what was the next thing that my manager was going to do to get me in trouble. And so from there, after I had that conversation with the HR director, I kind of decided that maybe it might be time for me to like leave this company and to look into other places to work. After work, I would go home and start like looking up jobs that I could apply to. I mean, I guess if I could give any good recommendation or advice out there, if you file a complaint against an employee or your manager at the place that you work with, just be prepared to leave that job, because things may not go the way that you want it to go, and that's just sometimes the way of the world. Another side note that I want to mention in this whole saga between me and my manager and HR is that I actually found out that Bob was getting paid $3 more than I was, and we got hired on pretty much at the same time. I think he was hired on like a couple months before me, but we were doing the same job. We had the same titles, but for some reason he was getting paid $3 more than me. So I actually went to my manager and told her that I found this out and what could be done to remediate my pay, because it kind of seems like a very blatant case of like gender discrimination and pay discrepancy and pay disparity. So she kind of sat me down. She was just like, Lexi, shame on Bob for telling you how much he got paid. Like, shame on Bob for telling anyone how much he got paid. And she basically told me that they couldn't do anything about it until my work performance improved. And mind you, all of my reviews quarterly, annually, up to that point were excellent. Was Lexi does a great job. We recommend Lexi to go into management one day, blah, blah, blah. Like, there was nothing on my reports that was like bad. And so that was just another thing. They did eventually fix my pay. But I wasn't there really long enough. Like, once they fixed my pay, I think I was there for just a short time afterwards. And I just like realized that because of that huge like pay discrepancy, that I was actually losing out on thousands and thousands of dollars a year because I was getting paid lower than my male counterpart. Before, the nail in the coffin for me was this conversation I had with the director, and at that point I was just like, I'm not signing anything because I did not do anything wrong here. I honestly felt like because of the pay discrepancy that I was having, because of my manager retaliating against me, and because of my manager having a history of trying to like set me up on dates with people, that I feel like I was kind of in the wrong here. I don't know. You tell me. But I decided that I kind of have had it. And this was toward the end of 2018, in December of 2018, where this all just came to a head, and I had that conversation with the HR director. And so after that conversation, I decided it's not worth it for my like mental health, because I was just so stressed and I was just like dealing with my medical condition, that this was just not worth it, and it was just time for me to leave. So I applied to one job during that time when I decided that I was gonna leave, and this was during the holidays where people had a lot of vacation time. So I would come into work and I would take a couple of things, like personal things from my desk, like photos or like knickknacks and stuff that belonged to me from my desk. I would take like one thing home every single day, so that by the time I decided to leave, it wouldn't be like, oh, Lexi, where did all your stuff go? The other thing that my manager had us do that I didn't exactly agree with was that when we would enter an order for a customer, she would have us actually print out that order and file it into like physical file cabinets, because her reasoning was that if we were to get audited, we'd have to be able to pull that order form, the original purchase order that the customer sent us, and the order entry that we put into the system. She's like, if we ever get audited, like we would have to like show proof that we did it in a timely manner. But the thing is, if you were go into our order entry system, you could print it out. Yeah, it'll show you that this is a reprint, but it'll also show you the date and time that the order was entered. But in her mind, she was like, no, we have to have the original. We have to have the original. I remember one time when we were getting audited that she couldn't find one, so she printed it out and she like crumpled it up and she stepped on it to make it look like it had been sitting in our file cabinet for a while. She made it look rough and dirty. And I feel like that was one of those things that I was like, weird. Definitely weird. That's neither here nor there. So she would have us like physically print all this stuff up and file it away. And we would enter so many orders a day that would just like, at the end of the week, you would just have like stacks and stacks of paper that I would just have to file away. And I remember she was like telling me, oh, Lexi, you have to be doing better at your like physical filing. Because we would have this temp girl come in and actually do the filing for us when it became too much. And she was like, you know what, you got to do your filing a lot better. And so I remember when I was thinking about leaving, I remember taking all the stuff that was just like collecting that I needed to file away and putting it in like my own like drawer at my desk, like just saying like, I'm going to file this at some point before I leave. But I had interviewed for that one job, and this was like late December, and I was at my 4th rounds of interviews for this one job. I made it all the way up to the director of the division that I was going to work for. And I definitely was like, I'm going to get this job. There's no way I can't get this job because I had made it this far in this interview and I was prepared to quit. And then I didn't end up getting the job. And I had to sit down with myself, and the best decision, what most people tell you is like, don't quit a company unless you already have a job lined up. But I did not listen to that. I think I kind of just had it with this company that I was working for. And so I kind of was debating, because the way that vacation worked at this company is that the most senior person gets pick of the days that they want for a vacation. And me being the last person hired on that team, I always get like the leftovers in the year. And so whenever it came to like the Christmas holidays, I would never get that time off. Bob and Jane and Nancy are all off on vacation, and I'm the one here that has to be in the office because I'm low on the ring of seniority pole. And I remember telling myself, if I were to just quit without 0 notice, without a 2 weeks notice, that would force one of them to come back into the office. Like, I could be petty and I could do that. But then I kind of sat down with my mom, and she was like, there are all these days in that you would get free pay for, you would get paid for Christmas, you would get paid for Christmas Eve, you get paid for New Year's. She's like, just stick it out and get paid for those days. And so I remember the last day that I ever worked there, I took out all those stacks of papers that I had to file and put stacks on every single person's desk. I put it on Nancy's desk, I put it on Bob's desk, Jane's desk, and I put it on somebody else's desk. And I was like, you know what? They're going to come back and find all this stuff that has to be filed. And yeah, they're going to be pissed. Number one, that was super petty. But I just felt like I had just had it. So January 2nd of 2019, I opened up my computer, logged into my own personal email address, and I sent an email to the HR director. And I was basically like, I quit. And I slammed my computer shut, and I was done, and I have never spoken or went back to the office or gotten anything from them ever again. And it was one of the worst work experience. And at the new company that I worked at, so like the job that I told you I didn't end up getting after 4 rounds of interviews, they actually called me back, and they were like, hey, this position opened up that we think that you're a better fit for. Do you want to interview for it? And I interviewed for it. And then they were like, sorry, no, there's a different candidate. Sorry, so sorry. And then that new company's HR department reached out to me again. They're like, hey, that position that you applied for back in December where you had those 4 rounds of interviews, it opened up again. Do you just want it? Like, we're just going to give you the offer. So I got really lucky that I was actually only unemployed for about 2 months from when I left that previous god-awful company, and I was able to start health insurance with the new company that I work for within like a month of starting there. I mean, the new company that I work for, I really like them. I still work for them today. That's why I'm not mentioning them. But I have been at this new company for like 4.5 years. I really like it. I really like the people that I work for. And I think that I have set new standards for myself when it comes to having a manager or having like coworkers that you work with on a daily basis, because after that first god awful job experience, I realized that it's just not worth it to stick it out at a company that is really bad for you, that's really toxic for your mental health and for your physical health. I know that's coming from a place of privilege because I have the ability to kind of, the field that I'm in, I have the ability to just kind of hop around, and it's very just like a specialty kind of field where there's not a lot of people that have the degree or the certificates or the requirement that's needed to perform the job. So I'm just really lucky, and like I said, that comes from a place of privilege that I was able to get that job pretty quickly after I had quit. I will say that going forward, that I will never leave a company without having another job offer in hand. I mean, I went through a lot of anxiety of just being like, how am I going to afford my medication and stuff? I will say that when I finally did leave that really awful company, it was kind of calculated in the sense that I knew at that point I was done with all of my medical treatments and all of my surgery, and I wasn't going to have that anytime soon. And that all I really needed to have is like the medication that I still take today. So it was kind of calculated in the sense of like when I finally decided like, is it worth it? I kind of just waited out like medical insurance, physical and mental health well-being, kind of like what weighs one out or the other. So I just got really fortunate in that I was able to get a job really quickly after leaving that god awful company. I kind of want to say what the name of that company is that I work for, but I also don't want to get sued because apparently they hate my ass and they just think that I'm a liar. And I kind of understand why, like in the workplace, I mean, I don't know if I would consider it that my boss was just like harassing me because I wouldn't go out on dates with men that she was like finding for me. But I think after some retrospective, I kind of do think that it was just some form of harassment, and I can see why people in the workplace don't speak up if that's something that happens to them, because it can be really scary and it can be really hard for you if somebody doesn't believe you, like your HR department doesn't believe you or your coworkers don't believe you. The HR director of that company didn't believe me, and my coworkers weren't supportive of me trying to go to HR in the first place. So I will say that I have never spoke to Nancy, Bob, or Jane ever since I left that company. I have no idea what they're doing. I don't want to know what they're doing. I'm very much happy in my new workplace. I'm happy with the relationship I was in. The company that I work for and my friends know to never go to this one place because it's so god awful on that employer's Glassdoor to see what the reviews of what employees are leaving, and everyone was basically saying, yeah, top management is bad, leadership is bad, they don't care, they only care about the dollar figures and stuff like that, they don't care about your development. And I'm like, that tracks really. So yeah, that's my story time. Like I mentioned before, don't feel sorry for me at all because I'm very much happy in the place that I'm at. I'm happy with the company that I work for. It's just far better for me and my mental health. I mean, the company I work for now is not perfect by any means. I don't know if any job is, but I really like where I'm at. I can see myself there long term, and I'm really glad that I decided not to put up with any bullshit and finally leave that company. This was a departure from my regular content, but I need content, and like I mentioned, I will have a reading vlog up next week for some of the books that I'm reading right now. Cannot wait to share what books that I'm reading right now. But yeah, that's all I have for today, and thank you for watching. Have a good day.